And that's why we record. So maybe some people are catching the recording. All right. Well, today we're going to talk about how to call old leads and not be awkward. To my surprise, this has been one of the most requested topics. So whenever I do a little like a freebie thing with maps on a topic, this is one of the most attended. Today, you're going to get way more than I give in that short little webinar because it's actually part of the program. So I'm excited because I know that this is a hot topic. So how do we call those old leads? What's our mindset around it? How do we not be awkward around it? And so forth. One quick thing. Do you remember last week when I got startled in the middle of the webinar because a limb hit my roof and there was like an explosion of debris in the front yard? I just have to tell you all a crazy story. Do you mind? Do you mind? I always wonder, do people want me to get to business or can I be personal for a second? I hung up and I thought I need to call a tree company. And I looked out the window and there was a tree company outside across the street. They're taking the tree down today. They started it last week and they're taking it down today. So I'm saying that partially. I told them I'm on a webinar, try to keep it quiet. If you do hear background noise, there is a lot going on, but I don't think it'll come through Zoom. Will you please tell me? Because I will tell them to stop. But I think you won't hear it. But I'm excited. And you know what else? It made me realize in sales how important speed to lead is. Because literally I went from I need to talk to someone to hiring them within about 1 hour. And I don't know, I might have changed my mind if that had taken too long. So just a good little lesson. So, but let me know if you can hear that in the background and I'll tell them to calm down out there. All right. Well, let's jump in. How to call old leads and not be awkward about it. Quick safety reminders. This is also in your workbook that you can look at if you have any questions. We do this every week, so I think you're pretty aware at this point. Today, we're going to talk again about how to handle mismatched words and actions. We talked about that last week, but we're going to do it again because it comes up a lot with older leads. So I'm going to reteach that just as a quick review and kind of reference back to a previous week. Then we're going to talk about how to call those older leads and what are some of the follow-up best practices. Sound good? All right, let's jump in. So I put this up here today. We usually don't have this after we talk about objectives, but just make sure since we're talking about calling older leads that you're doing that in a TCPA compliant way. Don't use an auto dialer and don't leave pre-recorded voicemails. Okay, so if you leave a voicemail, do that with your live voice, not pre-recording and dropping it. Okay, so just make sure you're doing that in a legally safe way. So quick reminder, I'll fly through this pretty quick unless you have a question. If you have a question, raise your hand, let me know. But this is a quick review. So the reason I put this in here today is a lot of older leads are people we were once in contact with, and then we fell out of contact with them. And sometimes it's because they ghosted us. Nobody's ever had that, right? We don't know what that is. But yeah, a lot of times clients will ghost us or they say, yeah, I'll talk to a lender and then we never hear from them again, right? So that's why I'm putting this up as a quick reminder. So let me fly through this real quick. So when you have a lead that didn't quite follow through with what they said they would do, best practice real quick again is, hey, I know that you said you really wanted the bigger house by the beach, okay? Then you're going to pair it with what I'm noticing is, and then describe the actual behavior. So I know that you said you wanted to talk to a lender and see what you're approved for. And then what I'm noticing is what's actually happened is we haven't connected, something like that. And then talk to me about what's going on there and make sure you smile when you say it. We talked about this a good bit last week, but let me just give you a quick example. So let's say that Marissa, maybe she disappeared on me and her last step was to talk to her husband about goals. Okay. So, hey, Marissa, it's Anna calling from the Haro Group. Hey, thanks for taking my call. And then we would probably do our intro real quick. And then I would say, hey, the reason I'm calling is I know a while back you talked about really wanting to retire early, and that involved selling the house and downsizing and buying an RV. That sounded really important to you. And I'm noticing we just haven't connected in a few months. I know you were going to talk to your husband. I'm not sure what happened, and we just haven't connected in a few months. Talk to me about what's going on. I'd love to hear the latest. And that might be how that sounds for an older lead, okay? Now, you may not have motivation for older leads because maybe you talked to them before you had this training. And what you can do there, you could also just say, hey, we haven't talked in a long time. I'd love to hear about your goals. And I realized we never really talked about it. I'd love to hear about what your goals are. You could do that as well. So any questions on that? I know I went quickly, but it's really a reminder to something we've talked about before. So anything particularly on that specifically? Louise, go ahead.
The three questions or the three statements you went through, do you say all of that without pausing for them to respond?
I do. This does usually take too long. So I think the key would be make sure you don't make it long and drawn out. But it could sound something as simple as, hey, I know you really wanted the bigger house so that you could grow the family. I know you were going to talk to a lender and I noticed we haven't connected since you said you would talk to a lender. What's going on? So it doesn't have to be a long thing. Typically when we pause, they fill it in. And I don't really want them to fill it in until I've asked my very specific question. Good question. Anything else on that before we move on? Okay, awesome. Stephanie said in the chat box, why is dating just like lead gen? Ghosting. Yes, ghosting is a thing. Raise your hand if you've been ghosted by anybody, just anybody. Yeah, I think most of us. So it's a thing, unfortunately. All right, well, let's go ahead and jump in then into how to open a lead or open a call with a lead that maybe we think, I don't really know who this person is. Maybe they've been in your database for a long time, or it's been so long since you had contact that you're like, I don't even know who this person is. How would you approach that call? So you'll notice this is similar to how to open a call, which we've learned early in this program. We're just going to switch it up a little bit for an older lead, okay? So their name and your name and where you're calling from. So, hey, Alex, it's Anna calling from She Knows People. Thank you so much for taking my call today. And again, you can put this in your own words. I appreciate your taking my call, but the idea is express gratitude. Something we're going to add in to the other opener. We're going to add a part. We're going to say, I know I'm calling you out of the blue today. And I like to kind of chuckle when I say it. Anybody want to take a guess why we would bring that up?
Because they're thinking it. They're like, why is she calling me out of the blue? So you raise the objection, right?
Exactly. I'm staying ahead of it, right? In my experience, if I don't say that, not everybody, but a lot of people will be like, who? What? Huh? Who's this? But if I say, hey, Deb, it's Anna calling from She Knows People. Thanks for taking my call. I realize I'm calling out of the blue today. What they often do is they'll be like, yeah, what is this? Or I was kind of wondering, but now it's friendly versus who are you? What's this about? Right? And that's what I'm going for. And then I'm going to say a while back, you expressed interest in moving. So remember the last part is about motivation. And let me tell you why we say expressed interest in moving. And don't worry, I'll put the slide back up for those of you filling out the notes. I have heard people say, I'm cleaning up my records today, or I'm going through my database. I hear this when I hear calls or if I'm shadowing someone. But if I were to call you and say, hey, Helly, I'm just cleaning up my database today, how does that feel to you as a human on the other end? A lot of you are shaking your heads. I'm sure none of you do that. Yeah. The other one would be what was it? What did I say? Cleaning up my database or calling through, calling any version of I'm calling through or cleaning up a database. What I picture in my head, my dad is a retired police officer. And he now is his retired job. Those people that'll never quit working because they don't like to sit around. That's my dad. And he now works at this little teeny tiny police station in Tennessee. And he's the evidence guy. So you know how on CSI they have the evidence room? And the guy who collects the evidence and protects the evidence room? That's my dad. So when I go visit him, I'm not allowed past a line in the floor or I could get in massive trouble. And so could he. But in his evidence area, there's old file boxes that it's like, if I picked up that file box and went, there'd probably be dust flying everywhere. Okay. When I hear I'm cleaning up my records or I'm going through my database, my brain imagines it sounds like we're in the basement of the evidence room. It just sounds it sounds cold. It sounds file boxy, it just sounds that way. That's my take on it. There might be people with a different view, but I think from from you all nodding your heads, I think we all agree it's just not the warmest. It's not the warmest. The other thing is when you say a while back you expressed interest, you're putting some ownership on them of like you did express interest at one point. And what I like about the verbiage expressed interest, are they a buyer or a seller? Do we know? We don't know. And because of that, it doesn't matter which one they are. So let me explain the philosophy here. A lot of times people lose a lot of time reading all the history notes, and that slows you down. That slows you down. That has always mattered. Slowing down always matters in a we don't want to do it kind of way. But in today's market, have you noticed you have to talk to more people to set an appointment in today's market? Well, especially because of that, we don't have time to waste, right? So I know in today's market, know your own numbers through tracking, but generally speaking in today's market, it's around 35 to 40 pickups in order to set an appointment. That means I need to get to 40 as fast as possible, right? So what I don't want to do is slow down and pull up an old record, read all the notes, then dial. And by the way, on a good day, only 1 out of 4 pick up the phone. So do you see how you could quickly lose a lot of valuable time? There could be a lot of valuable time that you're lost. So what I like to do is just keep it general enough that if they pick up and I have no idea who they are at all, it's general enough that it actually works. So if Rhonda picks up, I could say, hey, Rhonda, it's Anna calling from She Knows People. Thank you so much for taking my call today. I know I'm calling a little out of the blue, and it's because a while back you expressed interest in moving. I'm so curious. What had you thinking about that? And now we're off into conversation. Okay. Now I will address what to do to look at history notes and stuff like that. But just a little side note, who here has had a lead that was rude to you or negative, and then the next interaction they were positive? Their story changed. Yeah, several of you just raised your hand. It's so common. It is so common. And so the other thing I found in my own lead gen is if I read the history notes, it would put me in a mindset around the lead. And it was actually harming me because I was going in potentially with a negative view. And so I just kind of learned, and I'll teach you today how to put some of the priority notes so that they're obvious. I am a fan of knowing something, but don't read all the entire history notes. It'll just slow you down. So this is the opener that works. This works really well for those older leads. So again, key phrases here that are different than the normal call opener that I taught you at the very beginning of the program. It's, I'm calling you out of the blue, and a while back you expressed interest. Those are the two big changes. Okay. So if you were to call a lead right now, I said, here's a phone number, call it, and you had no context other than their name, you could use this opener and have a decent chance of getting into a quality conversation. Okay. All right. So what do we say on follow-up? So here's the deal. If you do not scan call history notes, which again, we don't want to bog down a lot of time reading all these old notes. So if you don't scan the notes, what you want to do is anchor it and just say, we spoke a few months back, or a while back you expressed interest. That's an example of anchoring it. A while back you expressed interest. And then just ask, how are you coming on those goals if you know them? Or what made you interested in moving back then? Okay, but the idea here is it's open-ended. Now, if you do have excellent call history notes, let me say first, read them while the phone is ringing, not before the phone is ringing, because now we're not losing time, right? So if I'm calling Bill, I'm going to dial Bill's number first, and while it's ringing, I will read the notes. And if he picks up on the first ring, which very rarely happens, then I'm just going to use my default opener for no idea what's going on. Because again, these are old leads. I don't have any idea who they are. If he is normal and it takes a minute for him to pick up the phone, there's a decent chance I will have been able to read a little something that could give me a little bit of context. So I might be able to say, a while back, Bill, I know you were looking at moving to Florida. So I would be more specific if I had time. And by the way, when we continue through the training, I will teach you how can you make notes that are really easy to find so that when you're trying to read notes while the phone's ringing, you can find what you need very, very easily and very quickly. Okay. One, I'll go ahead and give you a preview. if you look at the chat box, my favorite thing is to put an M colon, and then like this. So if I'm scanning, you know how in history notes, it might be like this. I'm just going to fill up the chat box real quick. You know, NA meant no answer, left message, left message, left message, left message, left message. And then all of a sudden, if there's a motivation because they picked up downsize, help family, closer to work. That note sticks out, right? Out of all these other ones. So that's why I believe put an M or something for motivation, or you could put a bunch of stars and then reason for moving here. You could do that. But the idea is make it stick out to yourself somehow. And we'll talk more about that in a moment. But I thought that context might help when I'm saying if you're able to scan the notes, it's helpful if you've made them stick out somehow. You may have never done that before. Just start doing it today. Everybody you talk to from today on out, just make their motivation stick out. That's the most important thing to stick out is personal motivation. So do a quick scan. Keep in mind the situation might be different. Reference the most recent or the priority notes, which you'll start doing today. Basic tips either way. Well, let me back up. Any questions on what's here on screen about how to read notes versus not read notes? Okay, looks like we're good. Here's some basic tips either way. And what I'm about to show you, we are going to do a deep dive in the next month before the program is over. I'm going to give you a preview right now, and you might have questions and know the deep dive is coming, okay? With older leads, what I find, and tell me you probably relate to this, they're like, I don't know, can you call me later? And you might realize this is our conversation every single time we talk. Like every time we talk, it's, I don't know, can you call me later? So the first tip for either way is pros and cons list. Okay, that's your next line there in the notes, the pros and cons list. I'm going to give you a preview of what that sounds like, and we are going to do a deep dive. We're going to spend a whole hour on, well, about a half hour just on pros and cons list in a class coming up very soon. Okay, but here's the big picture. If I call Alex and he's like, I don't know, I know I should move, but I just don't know that I'm ready. Could you call me in a couple months? Well, probably that's going to be the conversation we have every time. Have any of you ever noticed that with leads? It's like, it's just the conversation we have every time. The pros and cons list is helpful because what you're going to do, and I'm just going to model it for you, is I might say, hey, Rhonda, could you go grab a pen and paper real quick? I'd love to help get this off your mind. And if she says, great, yes, great. If she says, I can't right now, I'm not somewhere where I have a pen and paper or I'm driving or whatever, then I say, okay, I'll take the notes, no problem. Either way, I'm going to take notes. If she can't do it, I'll just send her a picture of my notes at the end. That's fine. And what I'm going to do is say, hey, Rhonda, what are all the pros? Like when you think of moving, and I'm not saying you're moving tomorrow, what are all the things that make you feel like moving is a good idea? And I'm going to write out her list. Okay, what else makes you want to move? What else makes you want to move? What else makes you want to move? That's awesome. What else makes you want to move? And basically what I'm going to work on is getting a list of pros that cause her to think to herself, I want to move. Then I'm going to say, hey, Rhonda, what are all the things that make you think I don't want to move? What are those things? And then I'm going to write that out. And from the years that I've done this, most often the pros list is a lot longer than the cons list. And that's why you want them to write it out while you're talking to them, because you actually want them to see, visually see my pros are greater, actually greater, longer than my cons. That's a win, right? Now, I will also say I had someone once who had like 1 or 2 pros and 1 million cons because he really, really didn't want to move. He actually still moved because one of the pros was taking care of his parents as they were older. And he was like, honestly, that's important enough to me that I'm just going to do it. So it was still helpful because I went into it knowing he doesn't want to do this. He's doing it because he feels like it's the right thing. So I'm going to be in it with him, and I'm glad that I understand where his mind's at. So that's the idea of pros and cons is let's help get this off your mind. What are all the pros? What are all the cons? And then my favorite question at the end of that is, can you get the pros without dealing with the cons? So I might say, can you get the bigger house closer to your family and closer to work without going through the pain of packing up your house and figuring out where you're going to move to? And what do you think they usually say? No, I cannot get those things. Now, sometimes they'll self-discover, you know what? After doing this, I don't want to move. Okay, good. Like the goal is let's just get them off the fence. Let's get them off the fence. Now, I know I did that kind of quickly. And again, you're going to get the very deep dive of that very, very soon. You're going to get a whole hour on 2 different methods to get people off the fence. So you will have that happening here in the next month. So that's kind of like tip number 1 for when someone is just stuck and they can't seem to decide, is just make a pros and cons list with them. And let's see what we can do. And by the way, that session with the deep dive is next week. So it's actually very soon. You'll get that. Okay. What are some other tips for calling these older leads? So we've got, oops, let me go. We've got the pros and cons list. Another great question. I love this question. What is the benefit of waiting? What is the benefit of waiting? Now, if I said to you, I think we can all agree that going to the gym is good for health or exercise in general, right? If I said to you, what's the benefit of waiting to exercise? What would your answer be? What's the benefit of waiting to practice your dialogues? Marissa, I love your facial expressions right now. You look like I'm stabbing you. Yeah, what's the benefit of waiting to take care of your like to brush your teeth? What's the benefit of waiting? You know, I'm getting kind of silly here. But do you see how some of these things it's like kind of hard to answer, you know? So I could ask someone who is always call me later, I don't know, call me another time, I don't know, pick another time. I could just call that person and get into conversation. And after I have their motivation, just say, hey, Rhonda, what's the benefit of waiting to get that bigger house by the beach? And just see what they say. Now, there might be some people who say, I don't retire for 2 years and I can't move because it's 3 hours away. And so I can't, the benefit of waiting is I have a job to finish. Great. That is a legit follow-up call. I actually would agree with them. That is actually makes sense to wait. What is the benefit of waiting? Well, I'm having knee surgery over the summer, and so I don't want to deal with moving in the middle. Could we help someone with that? How could we help someone with, I'm going to wait till the fall because I'm having knee surgery and I got to pack up my house and that's just a lot. How could we potentially help them?
Could share vendor information with them, help them set up a timeline for moving, packing.
Yeah. Yeah. What about a moving company, which I think you were just kind of alluding to? What about a moving company? Yeah. Stephanie said introduce them to a packer and organizer. Now, that may solve all their problems and they might say, I never thought about that. You know, but you got to isolate it. What is what's the reason they're not moving? What's the benefit to waiting? And if it's something that we have a solution for, present the solution and see what they think about that. And you may have some people who say it's just far too stressful. I can't think about it till after knee surgery. Okay, great. And you may have other people who say, oh my gosh, I never thought about that. That's brilliant. Yes, you just don't know. So that's a great question. What is the benefit of waiting? If you in your life have something that you're kind of on the fence about and you keep kind of like, oh, I don't know. Maybe ask yourself, what's the benefit of waiting for that particular thing? And see yourself what you come up with. So that's an idea there. I love that question. This is one of my favorite questions. I would put a star by this one. I am obsessed with this question. What would have to happen for you to fill in the blank? So true story. When my mom passed, before she passed, she said, I want you to go on a trip. And I want you to take people that are like meaningful, like take some of my friends, whoever, but I want you guys to go celebrate life and have fun together. And my thought was, I want to go to Hawaii. I've never been to Hawaii. But I was stuck at this point in time, I had a very full coaching load and I'm doing what I'm doing now, these webinars. And I just thought like, I literally don't know how to take 3 weeks away from work. And I was very stuck in like, and I'm a positive person, but I was stuck in but I have this and this and this. It just felt very logical to me. And a friend, she just looked at me and she said, well, what would have to happen for you to take 3 weeks off work? And I instantly started thinking of solutions. And I thought of who could cover the class. I thought about pre-recording the class and have it played while I was away with another coach moderating it for question. That question opened up my mind where previously it was like it was locked down and couldn't think. And as soon as she said, what would have to happen for that to be possible? All of a sudden I was a solution factory. And I've seen it happen with clients I coach, or even clients, buyer, seller clients, like, hey, what would have to happen for you to be comfortable moving now? Here's another one. What would have to be comfortable for you to write a contract on this house? What would have to happen for you to be comfortable meeting with me? Do you see how that's such a solution-based question? So I encourage you for yourself. Part of why I'm passionate about this class is it not only helps your clients, but it helps you in your own actual life. Ask yourself, what would have to happen for blank to be possible? And see what you come up with. A little sneak peek preview. I'm strongly considering taking a sabbatical this summer. And you know where it started is someone at family reunion said, what would have to happen for you to rest this summer for a couple months? And at first I was like, anxiety, like, because that's so countercultural, right? And I started playing with the question. It was the same person who taught me this question. What would have to happen for me to take 2 months extended time off? What would have to happen? And all of a sudden I started thinking of solutions. And I don't totally know what I'm going to do with that just yet, but it feels so much more possible now than it did even just 3 weeks ago. So what would have to happen? What would have to happen for you to be comfortable? It's a brilliant question. Here's what I want you to remember. Think of it like a history timeline. Remember in history class when the teacher drew little tick marks, at least at my age, I'm in my young 40s. There were little tick marks of here's when this happened and here's when this happened, and it moved down the timeline to present day. Think of it like you're moving them down the field. Remember the football field analogy of how many plays it takes to get a touchdown, and if you gain 10 yards, that's something to celebrate. With follow-up calls, I find for most of them, it is a multi-call game. I would love to say, oh yeah, old calls, you call them and they'll set with you the first time. Every now and then that happens. I typically find with older leads, the first call where we reconnect, it's revisiting motivation. And they're like, yeah, I really do. I still want to do that. But I called them out of the blue and they're not quite ready to do the next thing. So how can I move them closer? If I can get them to agree to talk to their husband tonight, or to talk to somebody and go through pros and cons and kind of talk through where they are, that is a step moving forward, right? That's a win. And then if the next call I get them to agree to talk to a lender, that's a win, right? So just know with these older leads, some of them you will find, I can't believe you called me today. I just said I had to talk to a realtor. Just like yesterday, I need a tree company. And I looked up and literally there is a tree company across the street and I hired them. Probably within an hour, I hired them. And by the way, I'm having an aha right now as I'm teaching you. This is real time. I had pulled up my phone and called the last tree company I worked with. And before I hit go, I looked up and like, oh my gosh, there's a tree company right there. So who got the business? The person who was literally in front of me. Is that not a takeaway? Okay. And I had a great experience with the last tree company, but I haven't heard from. I was actually sitting there trying to think of what were they called. And like I had to think it through for a minute before I could even remember their number to pull them up. So literally the people who are in front of you, in front of them, that's who they're probably going to work with. So get in front of them. Get in front of them. All right. So get them to move forward. That is a win. So let's talk now about how to manage your database in a way that makes this successful. So I'm not promoting this, but have you ever had the day where you log in and you're like, I have a lot of overdue tasks. I don't even know where to begin. Now, I would love to help you avoid that scenario. I don't want you to be in that scenario. That's not a good scenario to be in. And sometimes it happens. We are out unexpectedly, or something happens in our world where we're falling behind. Remember when we talked about how to create urgency, I said put the ownership on them to call you. So if I'm talking to Deb, I might say, "Hey Deb, when will you talk to a lender and call me back with what they said?" That helps if you're out unexpectedly. So just a reminder about that training we did way back at the beginning of put ownership on the client to call you, so that if you are out unexpectedly, they're not thinking, "Oh my gosh, Deb didn't call me today." Okay. And if you're like, "What are you talking about?" Just catch that recording in the client portal that it's sitting there. But it does happen sometimes. So what I learned the very, very, very painful way, I started with the oldest tasks first, thinking they're already a month old and I don't want them to get older. Well, guess what? They'd already cooled off. They were already too far gone at that point. So I learned through a pain point to start with the most recently due tasks first. So if you have, say, 30 overdue tasks, and some of them are from yesterday and some of them are from 3 weeks ago, start with yesterday's first, because they're going to be the warmest and the hottest. So start with those. You could also look through who's the most active on the website. Now, this might depend on the system you're using and the lead source of the lead, but take a look and just see who's been browsing the internet the most recently, looking at houses. That would make sense. So if I have a stack of 100 people and 10 of them were on the website recently, I'm going to prioritize them because they obviously were looking at something very recently. Okay, do you remember our very, very first call ever back in November? I taught you the voicemail strategy, and I said 6 calls in 6 days, leave a voicemail, 5 voicemails in 6 days. If you don't remember, in your notes, put session 1. I would go back and watch session 1. And that is the strategy that I would use. So let me hash this out a bit more for you, okay? If you have, and I'm going to pick easy round numbers just for the sake of example, okay? If I have 500 leads in my database and I realize I have no idea who any of these 500 are, no clue. The way to not succeed at a high level would be attempt to call all 500 once, and then all 500 twice, and then all 500 3 times, because what's going to happen is your calls will very likely be very spread out. So think about you. I can just speak for myself. My guess would be you're similar. If a number I don't know randomly calls me once every 3 weeks, I don't have a lot of urgency to pick it up. I don't know who they are. I might not even recognize it's the same number from 3 weeks ago because it's been so much time in between. I just see a number I don't know and I'm like, they'll leave a voicemail if it's important. Well, if you were to call, or if I got a call from the same number 5 days in a row, that sticks out a lot more, right? Now take it to the next level. In session 1, I taught you to leave 5 voicemails. That's how you're not spammy. When I see a number calling me every day that I don't know, personally, you may have a different reaction. But I'm like, oh, who is this? It feels so spammy. Now, if they call me and leave a voicemail, they're instantly more professional, right? And several of you just nodded your heads or gave me a thumbs up. Yeah. So that's the key here. And I think your voicemails can be very similar to what I taught in session 1. Just tweak it a little of, hey, hey, Rhonda, a while back you expressed interest in moving. I'd love to find out what you're looking to do. Call me back today by 5. Tomorrow, leave your second voicemail, and so forth. So what I personally would do, let's pretend it's Monday and I have 500 leads that are overdue, or just, I don't know who they are, whatever. I'm going to say, all right, today it's Monday. For 1 hour, I'm going to call as many of them as I can in 1 hour. You could say 2 hours. You could say 5 hours. I'm just picking a random time here. So for 1 hour, I'm going to call as many of them as I can. And let's say, this is a really high number. Again, just an example. Let's say I dial 100 and 20 of them pick up. That means I'm leaving 80 voicemails and I'm making 20 notes about conversations I just had. And some of them I'm putting on the do not call list because they said, don't call me again. Some of them I'm noting they're not moving for 3 years and I'm setting a task pretty far out. And some of them are going to do something soon and I'm going to set tasks appropriately. Okay. Tomorrow, I'm going to call again. But now I'm calling the 80 people who did not pick up yesterday, and I'm going to leave voicemail number 2. And maybe 20 more picked up. Are you starting to see the pattern here? And then by Wednesday, I'm down to 60 that have not picked up the phone. Now I've talked to 40. I have 60 that have not picked up the phone. I'm going to leave voicemail 3 on Wednesday. And on Thursday, I'm probably going to call 40 because 20 more picked up the phone. Do you see how that lays out? And by Friday, my list of 100 that I had on Monday is probably down a lot smaller. I'm probably getting callbacks now from the voicemails, and I'm cleaning up that list. And it is okay if people call and say, I've changed my mind, take me off the list, don't, or yes, I want to move, but it's not for a few years. We're just organizing it now. And we're getting this thing cleaned up and back into contact. That's the goal. That's the goal. Okay. Awesome. Okay. You all were very affirmatively nodding your heads that it made sense. So I'm going to keep going. We will have time for questions at the end. All right. Once you talk to them, assign an appropriate task, or if they haven't picked up, just put in a bucket of no contact. I'm using the terms kind of loosely. You all may have very different CRMs from each other. CRM is where you keep all your names and numbers. But you should, in most CRMs, and if you don't have this or you don't know where to find it, I would ask the CRM that you're using how to do it, because most of them have this ability. But I would want to somehow tag them as I tried 6 times and they didn't pick up, or something that indicates I gave it my all. and here's where we are. And then here's the minimum. Unless they've said, take me off your list or something like that, what we want to do is stay in contact with leads at least every 90 days. So let me lay this out for you. Let's say I called Susie. I left her 5 voicemails in 6 days. She never called back. I see in my notes, I've been trying to reach Susie for 3 years. She never picks up. Nothing's ever happened. I'm going to quit setting future tasks for her, because I want my tasks to be energizing tasks that mean something. And I don't want a task that when I pull it up, I'm like, ugh, Susie again. She never does anything. Have you ever done tasks like that where when you pull it up, you already know? But what I am going to do is I'm going to make sure that I notated. I've already done the plan with Susie. It hasn't led anywhere yet. And I am going to make sure I call her at least once a quarter. So what I personally do is in my database, I have a habit of sorting by last contact date. And anybody who's at like 85, 86, they're getting my call today, so they don't go past 90. Does that make sense to everyone? Awesome. So the ideal situation here is everyone in your database either has a task, or if they don't have a task, I'm finding them by sorting every 90 days, no contact. Got it? Awesome. Oh, Stephanie asked a good question. Do you find value with calling and then texting? Yes. Yeah. This is personal. I don't count texts as a contact just for personal accountability. I believe the best contacts are voice to voice. And there are people who teach differently, and that's totally okay. As long as you do it in a way that works for you, that's what matters. I personally want to keep myself accountable to voice conversations. So yes, Stephanie, I definitely text. I just don't count it as a contact or anything. But I might say, just left you a voicemail, or hi, you were on my website last night. I'd love to see what you were looking for. Absolutely.
I think I meant, sorry, I didn't type that well. If you're on call 5 and they're not answering, do you sometimes get better engagement with a text, like instead of just putting them in the no contact bucket? I know that to count it, it's a voice to voice, but if they're not responding, do you find that they'll sometimes text when they're not answering?
Yes. And I personally like to use that text to motivate them to get on the phone. So my personal rule, there's no study on this, it's just what I like to do, is I give it 3 texts and then I'm like, okay, let's hop on the phone. So I might say, hey, Stephanie, this is such a big decision. I can help you so much better if we hop on the phone. Can I call you now? Or I just call them. Have you ever been texting and the person calls you and you're like, they know that I know because they know I'm holding my phone. We're literally texting right now, and they just pick up the phone. And then I'll laugh about it when they pick up. Hey, Stephanie, I know we were just texting. This is such a big decision. I don't want there to be any miscommunication. What has you thinking about moving? So I'm just personally, the competitive side of me is like by the 3rd one, we're hopping on the phone. And that's how I like to use text. But yeah, definitely text, email, call, all those are great things. Different people respond to different things, you know? Okay. The other, like, the rule that I like to go by is if I complete a task, I'm setting a task. So if I, if I call Helly and I check off that I completed it, I'm going to set a next task unless I've run the full play and now she's on the 90-day plan. But if I complete a task, I'm going to set a task. And then I stole this idea from the buyer agents on my team, affirmations in the tasks. One day they all just seemed really excited. They were cracking me up. They're on the wall over here to my left, making calls, and they were just all like wound up. And I was like, what's going on? And they were like, we're about to call this guy and set an appointment. I'm like, awesome. And then they were like, yeah, haha, we haven't talked to him in 3 months, but that's what I put in my tasks. And they basically said, I want to have a positive mindset when I call leads. So my tasks are call to set appointment. You know, my task is talk about motivation, they like very positive things. And I was like, what a smart idea. So put some positivity in your affirmations. Put some positivity in your tasks just to help your mindset. Why not? Right? I think that can be a really helpful thing. Okay. Money making ideas. Always, always, always set a task with notes. So I'm going to give you an example of what I used to do on the left-hand side. I used Boomtown at the time. This was before Command. So this is a picture of my Boomtown. And on the left-hand side, it wouldn't let me create a task if it was blank. So sometimes I would just put a period in there. That does not help me. Not at all. That was not a great way to do this. What does that mean? Wife? What does that mean? I don't know. The only helpful thing here was talking to a lender. That's like the only helpful note. Look at the right-hand side. This is how I started doing tasks. Look at the right. What happened in the appointment on Monday? Did they make a pros and cons list? Now I don't even have to read notes. They could pick up on the first ring and I would know exactly what we're talking about. Right out of the gate. And then if I really want to make sure I don't miss a task or I prioritize it, I'll put stars. Nail down the appointment time for Friday. So these are just some little hacks that I've learned to make my life easier over time. Also, you know how there's the voicemail strategy from session 1? Some people are on voicemail 1, some people are on voicemail 5. I don't want to have to look at all the notes to figure that out. So I started also in my tasks putting leave message 3 percentage. That meant, oh yeah, that's the percentage of list price to sales price voicemail. That is my little internal thing. LM2, let me reference days on market. So I'm leaving voicemail number 2. It's going to be about days on market. So do you see how this just makes it so easy? And then also, what if you're on a team, or what if you're not on a team, but you have an agent that would help you out? I heard, who was it? I think it was Tiffany Fikes. Does anybody here know Tiffany Fikes? She's awesome. She's part of Her Best Life, if you're familiar with them. But she did a video recently talking about she and her husband, even when she was a single agent, they would take 3 months off. And I think she said they moved to Spain 3 months a year or something. And she said the way I did that as a single agent is there was another single agent who loved to travel. And the deal was he would cover for me for 3 weeks a year and I would cover for him 3 weeks a year. Smart, right? Well, could we all agree that if an agent's covering for you, the left-hand side makes their job really hard. Right-hand side, they could pick it up. If you call and say, Rhonda, I'm in a bind. My car just broke down. My son is throwing up. I don't think I can make it in today. Is there any way you can take care of priority stuff for me? Great. She could, based off this, right? So I'm a big fan of that. Part of why I'm passionate about this, by the way, is we had someone on our team fall very ill. Good news, she's fine. Everything's fine now. But she was in the hospital for months. We couldn't talk to her. We couldn't interact with her. It was a pretty bad situation there for a while. Again, thank the Lord, she's doing totally fine now. Everything's fine. One time on a webinar, I said she never came back and people thought she died. So now I'm really good about emphasizing she's alive and well, doing great. But she did actually never come back to our team. She ended up just transitioning into something else by the time she was out of the hospital. She did not take notes in a way that was helpful. She had her own internal language. It was almost like another language of acronyms and stuff that only she knew. And for us to try to figure out how to take care of the clients that she was responsible for truly was a nightmare. We had to hire an outside person to come in and try to make sense of it. Let's not do that, right? I want your business to run smoothly. So I like to think if I was out and couldn't talk to anyone and no one could text or email me, are my notes good enough that someone else could take care of this for me if I had to? Kind of like when they're talking about making your operating manual for your business. Are you taking notes good enough that if someone had to run for you, they could do it if you could not be contacted? My marketing person, who is wonderful, about to have her first baby, we're really excited. And I've told her, make videos, make notes so good that I never have to contact you. I don't want to contact you. So do it in such a way that I'm 5, explain this like I'm 5 and so I don't have to contact you. Same thing with your notes. So that brings me to the next point. Take notes as if you're out tomorrow. So if you look here, here's a note example. This is actually from the CRM, motivation in capital letters. And then here's all the good stuff. So if I call this person, I quickly can find the note and I see they want to downsize, they want to travel, they have grandkids in Australia. Less yard work equals more time to spend with grandkids. Great. Any one of us could call this lead and have a decent conversation, right? So that's how we want to take notes. Last thing, and then I'll open it up to questions. Money-making ideas for keeping up with leads, old leads, new leads, anybody. We have 2 different kinds of email campaigns. And again, just make sure you have permission to email people before you email them. That's part of all this. But with email campaigns, what's the difference between an email campaign and an e-alert? Well, an email campaign is personalized. Have you ever seen those emails where it's like, dear first name, happy, and then day of the week? And then the system knows to say, dear Alex, happy Wednesday. So that's what we mean when we say personalized email. That's an email campaign. You're not actually, you probably are writing the email, but the system is helping you out with when it goes out and some of that customization. And it usually has facts about the team or yourself. We have a lot of single agents in here, facts about yourself, facts about your business, facts about the team. And they do typically expire. So I might put, Marissa on a campaign. I would need to make a note that expires the end of May so I could put her on a new one. They do typically expire. Now with e-alerts, those are a little bit different. E-alerts never expire. And e-alerts are the ones that are market updates. Can you all see me, by the way? You look frozen for a hot second. Okay. E-alerts are more, some people call them market update emails. There's a variety of names people use, but these are the ones that update you on the neighborhood or the local area. I got one this morning for my own neighborhood. It was an e-alert. So typically for sellers, you can put them on their own neighborhood. And for buyers, you put them on where they're looking for. Ideally, it's once a month unless they tell you otherwise, because if they're getting them too much, they might choose to unsubscribe. And so get permission for how often you can send that to them. And what I usually do if I'm talking to Rhonda, I might say, hey, Rhonda, I can send this to you as little as once a month or as much as every 2 hours when a house comes on the market. What would you prefer? And then I will tell them if it gets to be too often, let me know and I'll adjust it. If you unsubscribe, I actually won't be able to email you anymore. So just let me know if you want me to adjust it. And I just tell them, if you choose to do that, I'm limited. I can't email you. And then a little pro tip is keep it general until they're actually a client. That's one of your value adds. Remember, we talked about setting appointments and making sure you hold back some value for clients only. So if I'm talking to Kelly and Kelly wants to buy a house, I might say, hey, Kelly, I can put you on a general search for the neighborhood you're looking for. And it'll have 3-bedroom, 2-bath. Now, once we meet and agree to work together, I'll tighten that up for you. And we can actually put down the hardwood floors. You want a pool, you want a fence, you want an acre. And when we're here in person, we'll do that together. So I'm just keeping it a little more generalized until she's actually my client. Okay? Because that's part of the appeal to working with me is that customization. So those are the two differences. I recommend that both are great. Know the person you're talking to. You know, if I haven't talked to them before and I'm attempting to make contact, I might do an email campaign. Again, just make sure you have permission. And if I have talked with them, that might be more appropriate to do an e-alert or a market update, because now I know something about what they're looking for or what they're wanting to do. So recommended action, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. For recommended action, call your no-shows. So the people you set an appointment with that did not show up, call them and use that thing we started with class. Hey, I know you said you wanted XYZ. I'm noticing we haven't connected. Talk to me about what's going on there. And that is a great way to get re-engaged with past clients to potentially reset an appointment. And then number two, prioritize leads based off what you learned today. You know, if you have a whole bunch of old leads, just start working them through a system. You know, pick your list for the week and focus on that for the next 5 days. Sort by last contact or most recently on the website using the methods from today. And then from here on out, make sure you're taking notes in such a way that your life is easier moving forward. You know, I'll be honest, when I first got onto the team, I was really overwhelmed by all of the chaos. My database was just pure chaos. And it really just became, okay, we're just going to start attacking this a chunk at a time. And I'll tell you, over time, it really cleaned up and I found a lot of business hiding in there. We've all had the day we've called older leads and they're like, oh man, I just sold a house 2 months ago. It's painful. Don't let it happen again. And just start cleaning it up and move forward. You just got to move forward. Okay. Deb, you're very welcome. You're very welcome. Okay. So what questions? I'd actually love to hear a takeaway. Let's hear a takeaway first. What's something you learned today that's going to adjust how you approach things? And then I'll open it up for questions. Oh no, did I do my job? Did anybody learn anything?
When you were,
Marissa, go ahead.
when you were describing, take the newer expired tasks or to take those first, the analogy that came to me was leftovers. So think of it like leftovers, and I'd rather eat leftovers from yesterday than from 3 weeks ago.
Yes. Ooh, yeah, that's a little, that would be concerning. That's a good analogy. I like that. Thank you. Rhonda said, call the 100, then the next day call the remaining 80 and so forth. Yeah. And you'll know the right amount. You might call for an hour and call 40 people, you know, and whatever that is. But the idea here is pick what's the list for the week and make sure you hit it every day, leaving voicemails. And then at the end of the week, you probably will have gotten in contact with most of them. Yeah. Okay, good. What questions do we have before we close out? We good? Nisi, go ahead.
Yes, I think I'm still confused as to when do we add the people from a list to our database, to the CRM?
Oh, yeah, we didn't really talk about that today. I think that's kind of dependent on each individual. So I think if I'm calling a list of people, maybe I'm making some outbound calls. Again, make sure you're doing that TCPA compliantly. If they pick up the phone, that's when I personally switch them into my database. If they're a good lead, you know, and they're actually engaging. So I think it's just kind of dependent on your systems and what works for you. But I generally look at it like if I've talked with someone and established this is someone that I want to make sure I keep up with, they go into my database.
Okay. So in reference to the NA for no answer, no answer, no answer, I'm just putting that, let's say if it's on an Excel spreadsheet, I'm just putting that in there until I make contact and then put them in the database?
No, so that is this, gosh, this is a complex question. It's a good question. It depends where your leads are coming from. Like I've never personally had leads in an Excel database, so I don't know where that would come from. I like to have them into basically a database is like a good interface for an Excel spreadsheet, you know? So I just believe if this is someone I'm keeping up with, they're going into my database. What I mean is back in the day when I called expireds, these aren't people I've ever talked to. They're not going into my Boomtown database until I'm not going to export every expired that ever comes in ever into Boomtown. But I'm going to call through my system. And if they pick up and I'm like, yeah, this is someone I want to keep up with, I'm going to take them out of my expired system and put them into my database. That's how I personally did it.
Okay. And then for the notes, so like you tried to reach them, you called, they didn't answer. Where are you making note of that
In the
for that?
CRM, in the CRM or I think we need to make an important delineation. So today's training was about old leads that I already have in my database that
Okay.
I'm trying to reestablish contact with.
Okay.
So I think you're more asking about new leads. It almost sounds like maybe cold calling or something, which wasn't today's topic. And it's fine you're asking, but I just want to make sure we're clear.
Okay.
Today's training was more old leads that I already have. They're already in the database. I've already talked to them. They're probably old, maybe a year old, and I'm working to reestablish contact. And we can have
Gotcha.
in our database that we've had for a long time that I call 20 times in a row and they never pick up. So I'm having no answer, no answer, no answer, no answer, left message, whatever. And then one day they do pick up. And it's a year in between pickups. And that's how it goes with older leads. I think you're more talking about cold calling systems, which we don't talk about a ton in this class because of some of the legal issues people are running into. So just make sure if you're cold calling, just make sure you're doing it in a compliant way. That's all.
Okay. Thank you.
Does that help?
Kind of.
Okay. I would say this would be a great question on an extra help call, which we will have next Tuesday. So perhaps
Yeah.
you can hop in there because I think it's going to take more time than we have today. And
Okay.
it's a little too complex to even do over email. So I would just submit that into the extra help call topics and join us Tuesday and we can do a deeper dive.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Helly, go ahead.
So my follow-up technique, I actually always refer to the last phone call that I had with them and check just that note. And that's usually enough to give me everything. I'll recall anything we
Yeah.
chatted about. And then that's also where they're at that time of call. I
Yeah.
also really like your idea of the motivation. I'm going to be putting that in a prominent place.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
thank you
and
for that.
you're welcome. Yeah. And some systems have priority notes sections. It kind of depends on what system you use. But a lot of them have that these days. I like to put motivation in the priority note. And even more,
Right.
if you're on a team, I worked with a team recently and I loved this. Rather large team, they have a huge amount of operations. And I loved it because the operations came and said, well, we call clients. How can we know their motivation? And the team changed the way they took notes and they started putting the motivation up top. It was like name, phone number, motivation at the top of the record. Because everyone calling that lead, if you're on a team, this really matters. Make sure the people interacting with that lead, even if it's not you, they need to know. They need to know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I thought that was really good. Yep. Thank you.
Good. You're welcome. Awesome. Well, we are right at time, so I'll let you go. Did y'all hear the trees falling? Amazing. It's been rather loud. So I'm glad I was like, I told them to tell me and nobody's telling me, so they must not be able to hear it. Awesome. Well, I'll see you guys next week. Next week, we're going to do a deep dive into 2 methods of how to get someone off the fence. So that pros and cons that I alluded to today, we'll do a much deeper dive next week. And then there's a new pattern you haven't heard yet. And that it's good for people where, do you ever have people you're like, every time I talk to them, or we're in the same loop of not ready, I don't know, I can't make up my mind. And it's just like the never ending cycle of we're stuck in a cycle. And this could be true in personal life as well. We're going to learn a pattern to kind of interrupt that cycle of going nowhere. We're going to talk about that next week. So next week will be awesome. Deep dive into motivation. And then we'll be done our March webinars. We'll pick it up in April and finish out April 23rd. I can't believe it. That's crazy. So I'll see you guys next week. And don't forget, Tuesday is the extra help call.
That's great. Thanks, Anna.
Bye, everyone.
Have a good week, everybody. Bye.